Welcome to the Spectrum Connection, a podcast hosted by Jess
and Alyce. As two mums of neurodivergent kids, we are here to share our experiences, insights, and advice with other parents navigating this unique journey.
Join us as we discuss everything from daily challenges to breakthrough moments, all with a focus on understanding and celebrating neurodivergence. Welcome to this week's episode. We are going to be talking about food. That is best. I love that saying.
Yes, so do I. And it doesn't just apply to those, baby days. We really need to use that saying more, I think.
Yeah, I think it suits perfectly for what we're going to talk about, but I think it also, like, a lot of people know the statement from way back when we were feeding our babies the best way we could. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit about doing what works for you and your family. So yeah, I think it's a really popular topic again. I keep saying that every week.
Popular and somewhat controversial, I think. I don't know what it is about nourishing our bodies that's so controversial. From baby to right way through, even adults. I just don't know.
Yeah, anyway. I've been posting a few videos on Instagram about food, and the comments that come through, people are ruthless. They're just say how whatever's on their minds, it just comes out, and very rude. So yeah, it's not like I've got pretty thick skin about it now. I'm like, I don't really mind because we're going to do what suits us. But to everyone else, I just feel bad if anyone else is vulnerable and takes what they say to heart. So yeah.
Especially scrolling through those comment sections, you sometimes got to pick and choose when you're going to dive into those, whether you're in the right headspace to deal with it. And in my case, I'm like, just scroll on. You don't need to reply. I find it really hard. Sometimes I type out the response and then I'm like, no, let's delete, not my problem. I've grown a lot. If I was back early, I would have just been firing, but grown a lot.
I think when you first start out, you want to get back to everyone. You want to advocate. But then you soon realize that people that are commenting on these things, they're not going to change their minds by you replying to them. So then it's just like, is it worth my energy doing this? I think putting our energy more into things like this podcast and advocating in this way is probably more healthy and more worth our time.
We completely forgot about self-care and our shout out. We just got straight into it. So
we're professionals.
We've got this. Know what we're doing. Self-care prompt for this week. And we were just discussing before about how with self-care you really just have to make the time and not wait for the time. It's like everything really. We just keep saying, oh, we don't have time, but we have exactly the same amount of time as anyone else that does self-care, even if our circumstances are different. Just need to change things up the best you can. It's not always easy, but
I like to think of it like if you're going to organize a doctor's appointment, you will find the time for that. So it's the same thing. You're working on your health, so you will find the time. You just got to book it in, and it has to be non-negotiable. But our shout out today goes to Jack's Grid Pick, who's been commenting on a few of our reels lately. So thank you so much. She said that she loved this episode that she commented on. So thank you so much. And we are so appreciative of everyone listening and giving feedback of all our podcasts. We're on episode, I believe it's episode 8 today, which is crazy. That's so cool.
Crazy, yeah.
Fed is best.
All right. Where are we going to even start with this? I mean, we kind of started, but we didn't.
I guess we could go a little bit into our perspectives on it lately. I think my perspectives on it has changed over time. Obviously, when our kids are young, we get a lot of professional opinions, external opinions. Food is a big one in terms of getting advice and things like that from people. And I think when you're vulnerable, you kind of just like worry about it a lot because people see food and go, oh, like, they're not going to get enough nutrients, so they're not going to survive. And I think that's where that sort of perspective comes into it, of like that survival mentality. But I think as time has gone on, the more relaxed that I've become with my son, particularly, the more he's eaten. So it's interesting in
Yeah.
that way. He was very, very, actually, rewind time. He was a very good eater as a baby. He was eating everything. And then he had what I would call a regression at 18 months. And then he just stopped eating all the foods and he got very limited and has been very limited his whole life. I'm not sure about your kids. Are they also limited eaters?
I have two fairly good eaters, eldest and youngest, and the two in the middle, not so, not so great, quite
Yeah.
restrictive. The beige diet mainly. Yeah, so it's like it blows my mind. People always go back to parenting. It's parenting. Oh, they just let them eat junk. That's why they don't eat, all those things. And I think like my family situation is prime example. I've raised my kids all the same. I've offered the same foods. I did the whole thing as a baby, like the whole list, those food lists, and I was introducing them to all the food. Like I was one of them parents, and I did that with every single child. And one of my children, he does not eat any fruit or veg and has not done since a baby. Like I could give him puree, he'd have it, but chunks, nothing from a baby. Whereas my other kids, they all eat fruit, different types of fruit. Another one doesn't eat veg, but he'll eat fruit. Like they're all so different. And I've just done exactly the same for every single one of them. So it's got nothing to do with parenting. Let's chuck that out before we even move on from that.
It's interesting though, because I think a lot of people, especially if you have autistic kids, they're often referred to a dietitian or a nutritionist or something. And it really depends on who you go to as to what advice you're going to get. But I get a lot of parents attending those sessions, and they tell me that they're given a list of foods that their kids just absolutely won't eat. And they're told, oh, the food that they're eating right now, it's like they're lacking nutrients. And there's this big medical model of this where it's like you need to kind of push your kids to eat these foods or they won't like be healthy. And I think there's so much more that is to it than just
So
pushing kids to eat it.
And the whole, oh, they'll eat when they're hungry and just keep putting it on their plate and they'll eventually eat it. I'm like, if I put certain foods on my kids' plates, they're not going to eat anything that's on that plate. So, like, you have to pick and choose. It's not
Yeah.
worth the stress. I've been off it. Like, I've, had conversations with other professionals. They're like, oh, have you tried a dietitian? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what is a dietitian going to help with? They're
Mm.
going to tell me what nutrients the child needs. I kind of know that already. I'm gonna get to the bottom of, why they're not eating or what we give them in supplement that they will eat. Or,
Mm.
even my children with actual supplements, like my boy who doesn't eat fruit veg, he went through a stage where he didn't eat meat either, like very, very minimal meat. And his iron levels, we got a blood test and his iron levels were really down. And I can kind of like gauge with his food now, watching him what he's eating, and he's the dark circles under his eyes and his sleep, and I can go kind of pick it now, like, oh, I think his iron's a bit low. And we were on supplements and stuff, but I could not get him, the doctor was like, oh, try these lolly, like, he doesn't eat lollies. He does not eat gummy lollies, so there's no way I could get. So I've gone through at one stage when he was, quite low in nutrients, I went through so many different supplements.
Mm.
Just like you do food. They're expensive. They're like, $30 odd dollars for one thing. And yeah, I'd try it and he would either turn his nose up at it, or he'd try it and be like, no, I'm not having that one, or have him for a couple of days and then be over him. And, you
Mm.
know, yeah. So even that side of things isn't always easy.
Yeah, I think we've been through a lot of supplements too, a lot of supplements.
Yeah.
And I think it just like it kind of highlights the fact that there is this like big cost as well, in addition to like typical parental responsibility with like trying those different things. And it's not just food, it's like toys and things like that as well. But I think the supplements are great for people who can get them in their kids. There's like unflavored ones, but still like our kids are hypersensitive sometimes and can detect that stuff in everything.
Yeah, the amount of times I'm like, people are, oh, just sneak it into the food. Just why don't you make a smoothie and put that? And I'm like, are you for real? Like, particularly one of my boys is really sensitive, and he picks the flavors out of, like, he obviously doesn't know what the flavor is, but he's like, that don't taste right. What?
You did something to my food.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I've tried all the things over the years.
and
Not
it
worth
kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about the other day. I think it was like weeks ago. The other day, we were talking about the dinner table and
it.
the way that our kids eat. I think that sort of impacts on their food as well, because I know in the same video that I have had many bad comments on about Jacob, Jacob was sitting on the counter and he had his feet on the counter. And the amount of comments that I got saying
So
how
no,
bad of a parent I
dare
am
you?
for sitting on the counter. And I was highlighting to them that he would eat more nutritious foods so what I do with Jacob nowadays is I will pretend like I'm eating it and I'll just be like, you want some? Like sort of like offer it to him, but not like pressure him at all. And he will eat it more often than not. So I tend to feed him more lately. He still feeds himself, but I tend to feed him more. And that's
Yeah.
okay. He's getting food into his system.
And
The
it
amount
comes down to
of minutes.
capacity. He might, on those particular days, he might just not feel like eating, couldn't, like, just doesn't have the energy to. I I understand that. I sometimes wish I had someone to spoon feed me, because I just,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like another thing. I don't know. I can easily go all day without eating, not get hungry, that kind of thing. But I don't have a person to prompt me. I have to prompt myself because I'm an adult. Whereas kids, to have adults there saying, "Hey, you haven't eaten for a little while," and yeah, it's just part of parenting. You do what you can to
Yeah.
make sure they have.
I think I'm the same way. Like I can go ages without eating because I just will not think of it. And
Yeah,
all of a sudden I'll start eating and I won't stop. But
yeah,
I wonder if that's like an ADHD thing. And I wonder, like, I don't want to like label it or anything, but I'm just talking about because Jacob can get quite hyperactive. And so he can
yeah,
get, I imagine his body gets tired because I watch him sometimes and I'm like, dude, you need to stop because your body's not going to be able to do that anymore. Like he will run and he will just be moving constantly. And
yeah,
so I imagine your arms hurt, your legs hurt. You're gonna, and then I'll start to feed him and then he'll start to eat. And his body needs that energy because obviously he's been moving, but just like whatever works.
yeah,
Whatever works. I have parents telling me all the time that they go to pediatricians. You guys are going to hear this a lot during these podcasts, but pediatricians have medical qualifications. Yes.
yeah,
They will give you advice based on medical advice. I have parents coming out of those appointments crying because their pediatricians are telling them that they're doing the wrong thing, feeding them, they're letting them eat all these foods. Don't listen to them. I mean, listen to them, but don't listen to them. You
yeah,
know your kids best. You have instincts in you. You're a parent. You want the best for them. It really frustrates me that these parents
yeah.
get
And do you
so
know what I
upset.
think? I think about I've thought about this the other week when we were even talking about diagnosis. Think about pediatricians, GPs, that kind of thing. In their study, they have so much content to cover. Like there's so much but their main role is to keep essentially keep people alive. Like
Yeah.
pediatricians would be concentrating on, I'm guessing, I haven't done the medical, stuff, but I'm guessing that they would be focused on the big ticket things, the big, all the more common things that babies, children have difficulty with, because that's what they're going to see in their practice a lot.
Mm.
Unless they specialize in things like autism, restricted eating, that kind of stuff, they're not going to have in-depth information research. They're going to just have that broad idea. This is good, this is bad, this is what you should be doing. So like, yeah, unless they specialize in it, I think just take it with a grain of salt. Like, obviously, like, I don't think we need to be told what's nutritionist and what's not. Like, there's enough in the media and all sorts these days. Like maybe back in the 80s or something, yeah, but these days it's everywhere. And I think we're drilled so much about fruits, vegetables, nutrition. And I actually, before we jumped on this, because I was just like Googling the requirements for food for kids. Like I didn't even think of it before. I'm just like, I know they need fruit and I know they need veg, but the quantities, like those quantities are quite small. I think it said for 2 to 3 years, they need 1 serve of fruit. So that's like half of ours. Was it 2.5 serves of veg, 4 serves of greens, and 1 serve of meat, 1.5 serves of dairy. So like it's still a lot, but it's not as much as I kind of originally thought. I don't know. And that's not
Yeah.
just for one day. Like you can have that over the week. That's the serves recommended for the day. But say for instance, I don't know, they eat no fruit one day, but the next day they eat 5 bananas or something. I don't know. Like that evens up over the week. And we probably find even with restricted eaters, they probably still get a fair bit of their nutritional need, I'd imagine, over the week or
Yeah.
months.
I had a parent talk to me that they went to a dietitian and the dietitian was really good, knew lots about neurodivergent children and the way that they eat, and they got them to write down all the foods that they ate in a week. And he had a look at all the foods. He said, getting calcium here, getting this there, getting this there, he's fine. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I think that we hold this like societal expectation that every meal needs to be this super food healthy like extravaganza, but I think someone even said like look at the day as a whole instead of looking at each meal. Like yeah, they
Yeah.
got some milk in this morning, or yeah, they got like maybe a piece of fruit in the nighttime. You got to look at it like that. Like it doesn't need to be every meal needs to cover all bases. um and
And I
there's
think too, like,
that,
a lot of people focus on, whole foods, not processed stuff. And our kids tend to steer to the processed stuff. But if you look at it, they've actually, a lot of the processed stuff has got added stuff to it. Like a loaf of bread isn't just grains because they add the extra minerals, iron, all of that in there. Might
yeah.
not be the best loaf of bread because it's got the preservatives and blah, 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 but it's giving them what they need in that lovely white piece of carb that my children love.
We go through bread a lot too. It's like a favorite. But I think I wanted to mention quickly that there was like a method of feeding that really worked for us. And again, do what works for you. I'm just sort
Yeah.
of bringing this up as sort of like a method that kind of worked for us. And that was having like a plate where you have like a sometimes food, you have a food that they really like and will eat, and then you have a food that you don't necessarily think they'll eat. And sometimes that food isn't sitting on the table with them. That food might be just down the other end of the counter or, on the other side of the table. Exposure, it kind of really helped with Jacob, and he sort of touches it now. So it's kind of like edging closer to eating. But I think that slow and steady is, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
important.
We often have what I call platter dinners. It's normally when I couldn't be stuffed cooking. And
I have
but
those.
the kids think it's like the best thing. So it's win-win for everyone. But I just put like whatever random stuff we have in the fridge, like fruit, cheese, crackers, whatever. And I put something that I know they all eat. And I just put that on the table and they can pick and choose what they like. And that's another way of like offering it. Obviously, for some certain things like can't think off the top of my head, but like something that might really irk them, like a particular child, I won't put that on there because I don't want them to turn off. Like if they see it amongst the other food, they're not going to touch the other food. So, you play it by ear, your kids. So yeah, we do that. We do that a lot. And my husband's really great at when he cooks, he'll be like, he's done this since they were little. He'll just call out, who's going to be my taste tester? And
Oh,
it's like this best, the kids like, oh, me. They all fight over who. And not so much now, but that's like they would come and taste, a spoonful, and he can seem to like not convince them, but they seem to, yeah, I don't know. He's got
yeah.
more of their palate too. Like he likes to eat the same stuff they do. So I think they kind of trust him more. Like they love it when he does the grocery shopping because he gets all the good stuff. But when I get the grocery shopping and I come home, they're just like, oh yeah, they kind of disperse. Whereas he does the shopping, walks through the drawer, and they all like straight into the bags because I know he's got all the good stuff.
That's what it looks
So
like
they
in
trust
my
him
house
more.
too. When the
Yeah.
groceries come in, it's like these seagulls coming through.
And then when I open one of everything, and I'm like, we've got to
Yeah.
have this food last us, the week, the fortnight, especially these days. It's like, and with 4 kids, it's kind of like feel like you're rationing people out sometimes,
Yeah.
depending on.
It goes so quickly, and I don't know where it goes, but it goes somewhere. But with that, I find that really cool and a really cool idea. It's just like that low pressure way of exposing them to food. Like even just like playing with food as well, I found helped. Just like what your husband did, having that fun interaction where there's no pressure if they do or don't have it, but it's just like, it helps. Did we want to read out some of the questions that we got? We got a lot, so maybe I'll choose a few of them. So this person said, our dietitian said McDonald's nuggets are protein and protein is good. Remove the guilt.
Yes. Yes. Everyone's that nutritionist, dietitian, whatever name.
Give me their
Everywhere.
details. Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, exactly that is that you can find things, as you said, you can find the good in them. Where am I going? Okay. This person has said social media doesn't help. You know your child best. Fed is best. That's so true. And it's okay if they eat the same thing for breakfast every day. Totally. I think
Me, as
I think
adults, have routine breakfast. And that was one of the points that I wanted to bring up too, that a lot of people, I don't know, because like, I don't know if they just don't have that or they're not neurodivergent, they don't understand the thing. But, sometimes I do it, but sometimes my kids will have, like one of my boys went through a stage for like a week. He just wanted Nutella sandwiches for breakfast, Nutella sandwiches for lunch, Nutella sandwiches for dinner. Not ideal, right? But he went through a stage before that where he wasn't eating a great deal. And so that's what he wanted. So that's what I fed him. And in my mind, I'm thinking, again, like, aren't you sick of Nutella sandwiches? But then when I reflected, I'm like, well, I have the same breakfast every day and I'm not sick of it. So,
yeah, I think I could eat the same things every day and be okay, so okay with it.
Yeah.
As long as they're safe and safe foods for them.
Yeah.
There's no issue in it. Like,
Yeah.
and
And
I
it
think
like,
a lot of kids do that.
yeah, and he went through that stage where he ate the Nutella sandwiches for every meal. And then he was kind of past that and he wanted different stuff. And so then, this kind of
Yeah.
comes and goes in waves.
Mhm.
Maybe some kids might eat it for the rest of their life for breakfast, but
Yeah.
they're eating.
Whatever works. Someone said, are they growing? Do they have energy? You're doing great. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. How can we make society see that fed is best? Doesn't stop at toddlerhood. That's an interesting question.
It is.
Doing podcasts like this, I think when other parents know that other parents aren't doing these extravagant meals for their kids, I think just normalizing it is just what we need to do. Because I think parents just feel guilty sometimes. They're like seeing all these social media posts where these kids are eating salads and all these amazing, incredible things, and going, "Oh, I'm not doing that. My kid won't eat that." So then they feel bad and then they don't talk about it. But I think talking about it is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
dietitians need to be more neuroaffirming.
Because I think the main thing too that we need to, like, it's not a choice. These food, the kids aren't choosing not to eat certain things. There's always an underlying reason. Yeah, and that it goes deep. Like, feeding challenges isn't a very surface level thing. There's so many things that go into that. We're only just now diving into like food therapy with our OT for one of my boys. And that's purely just because he actually said to me, Mum, I would like to start eating different foods. And he actually came to me and said, like, I don't eat very healthy. And these are messages that he's getting from the outside world, not from us, because I don't
Mm.
think, and that frustrates me, because when you think about like the statistics of eating disorders, like I think I probably should, I don't know if I should put a trigger warning on that, but I think things like anorexia, 20 to 30%, I think, of people with anorexia are autistic, and 89% thereabouts of autistic children have food challenges. So
Mm.
it's very common. And when, getting messages like not eating healthy or worried about his weight, which is another thing that frustrates me. Yeah, I've been in that position as a kid, and I went to really restricted eating. So yeah, I experienced restricted eating as a teenager purely on those societal, views on what's healthy and what's not. And I got to the point where I was, you know, looking at all the food that I was eating, going, oh, that's not healthy. So I cut it out completely and I wouldn't have it. Like soft drinks. Back then, we didn't have the sugar-free versions, and people would, be at a party or something and people would be offering me, and I'd be like, no, I would only drink water, milk, or juice type thing. I mean, looking back on it now, I didn't have my knowledge very, very good, because juice wasn't as good either. But I got to the point where I was completely restricting certain foods
Mm.
because that weren't healthy. So I think we really need to be careful on what messages our kids are getting fed and what we're saying and other people are saying, because if their diet's quite restricted as it is, and then people come in and go, oh, that's not very healthy eating, like all they're eating is nuggets and chips every day, and then they're like, oh, that's not healthy eating, and then they get to the point where they're worried about that kind of stuff because society is all about that at the moment. Yeah, you've got to be careful that they don't then go, okay, well, I'm not going to eat that either. So then what are they left with? So I think, yeah, it's a thing that we just,
And I
we just have
think
to.
it's important to highlight that, like, when it gets to like such a severe restriction of foods, when there's only one or two safe foods, like parents are walking on eggshells, really, like hoping and praying that their kids don't stop eating these foods because, yeah, that they just want them to continue eating them because they're eating something. Because there is the potential, and a lot of parents go through it where the kids restrict themselves so much where they just don't eat anything. It's talked to me all the time. My kid only drinks milk or just yogurt pouches, or someone in the comments said that they only eat apples. It's it can get to that state, and that's why when people say, oh, just don't feed them those foods and feed them all the healthy foods, that's when it gets scary, when
Yeah.
our kids will literally starve themselves instead of eating those foods. And so that is why it is extremely important to understand that it's not just the way we feed our kids,
Yeah.
it
And I
is.
think too, it's important that you don't go off what other people say or what you think, and start experimenting to try and get them to eat different foods, because there's a whole science around it. Like I said, we're just starting into the food therapy now, and I didn't realize how much, like, our occupational therapist is very knowledgeable, and she's explaining to me every step, and it's so gradual. We're still very much at the white carb stage, and we've been doing it for a fair few weeks now. It's just slowly introducing something at his own pace, very neuroaffirming way. But I'm, like I said before, I'm only doing that because he's expressed to me that he would like to start eating certain foods. Out of all of my kids, he's probably one of my most restricted eaters, and he's the healthiest, in like the fact that he never gets sick. So
Yeah.
compared to the other kids, like, he just doesn't. So I think you just, not focus on that so much if they're actually eating, and just,
Mm.
yeah.
I think another thing I wanted to bring up was like the sensory component of foods. I think it's important when you're evaluating food, your child's diet, it's like getting like a sensory profile done of what foods do they prefer. So when I looked at Jacob's diet, he prefers really tangy foods like tuna and mandarins, like things that are strong tasting, which is very like, not he does like beige foods as well, but he does like that type of food. So when we found out that he liked strong tasting foods, we were like, hold on, oranges, tuna, we introduced again, and he ate it. And we were like, had we not known that, had we not sort of investigated the sensory component of foods, we wouldn't have introduced that food. He likes crunchy food, so he's always liked ice blocks to like crunch on them to regulate himself. See, there's a different component to food other than just eating and fulfilling your hunger. It's also that sensory component of fulfilling their regulation. So there's that level of support for them as well. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. I
Um,
think also, sorry, also the, you know, how food is a need of our body. And it's, I think about schools, for instance, where, they've restricted certain foods that you can and can't bring. They need, like, what they need to get their head around is that, they're all about challenging behavior and things. They don't want that. Well, if the kids don't eat and they're not full, that's going to trigger that fight response, because you need food for survival. So if they're hungry, they're not going to be able to be regulated enough to what they need to do. So
It's
yeah.
interesting. I've heard a lot of parents talk about daycares as well, the ones that have their own foods, provide their own foods to kids, and parents of autistic kids trying to work out a way that they can bring in foods for their kids because their kids aren't eating during the day. And they're so heavily resistant to it, the daycares. They're just like, no, you can't bring in an external food. So your child literally has to starve in order for them to fulfill their I don't even know why that would be the case. Like, what's the issue with them bringing in their own food? I don't understand.
Yeah, and some preschools, daycares, like schools where they have to take their own food in, and there is a criteria on what they can and can't, like
Yeah.
no packaged stuff and no this and no that. And I was actually speaking to my sister, for my niece, the preschool has just now introduced a policy for nutrition where it states in there that neurodivergent children may, or most children would struggle with certain food groups, and that they shouldn't be restricted. I think they also mentioned in there something about,
That's really cool.
yeah, there was something else that they mentioned in there. Oh, about that there's no healthy and non-healthy foods. Like, because I think that that's a thing in schools too that's always pushed, is this is healthy, this isn't healthy. But
Mm.
it's not like that. There's food is food. It's not healthy if you're eating it, excessive
Yeah,
amounts for every meal and not having anything else. So yeah, that was something that I was really surprised to hear about, and I'm hoping that will hopefully go across the board, because
that's
yeah,
really
it really needs to happen. We need to change our outlook on food and nutrition, and yeah.
yeah. I really dislike when they call them good or bad foods because it's like food is food. It's not like
Food.
a moral decision, it's so it can be so impactful to kids. So yeah. What do you guys think about food? Fed is best. What are your experiences? We'll probably put up a few reels over on Instagram if you want to go comment on them there. But yeah, it's a big one. And we could probably talk about this a lot. And again, we probably will. But yeah, fed is best.